I can't do it.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. It. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
All right, welcome in, kiddos. Another edition of the Daily Puck Drop here on Tuesday, November 12th. I'm going to just apologize for the voice and how I sound. Sicker than a dog, but you know what? We're here for you. And I'm going to have to clear my I'm sorry. We are broadcasting from the Puck Sports Studios, built by Limback Lumber. Contractors, they got free deliveries, everything from whole house packages to homeowner DIY projects, the largest stock moldings in the Northwest. That was the worst start of the show ever. They got old school service. They've been doing it since 1930. Give Limback Lumber a call, 206-782-3487. Visit them online, limbacklumber.com. Follow the show on all the social media platforms, Puck Sports on Twitter and Instagram, Puck_sports on TikTok. Facebook, you just find it at Puck Sports there as well. Also, join the Puck's Posse community membership. QR code there on your screen if you're watching the show. We'll take you right there to the Puck's Posse community membership. Please sign up today. Brand new features coming via the Puck's Posse community membership. And really, what it really is doing is supporting Puck Sports and supporting this venture as we continue in the rest of 2024 and into 2025. All right, what do we have on the show today? See if I can survive the hour and a half. It is a Tuesday. That means Danny Kelly stops on by from the Ringer. We talk Seahawks. We talk NFL. We get fantasy football advice from Danny. He comes in about 17 minutes from right now. He's got a lot to say about Caleb Williams and Eberflus. So I'm looking forward to that. Just what a train wreck that the Bears are, train wreck that the Cowboys are. How do the Chiefs keep winning? We'll cover it all with Danny Kelly from the Ringer, senior draft expert, senior reporter there for the Ringer, covering all things NFL. Then we'll switch gears around 10:45. We'll talk college football with John Canzano, johncanzano.com. It's brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. College football rankings coming out later today. We can discuss Trent Bray's comments, Oregon State head coach, about how much it costs to have an NIL or have a football team nowadays. Mark Harlan, the AD at Utah, will get his reaction to that. I'm going to ask about Jed Fish's decision to stick with Will Rogers over Damon Williams. I'm just curious if he agrees with that or not. And then the cost of John Mateer. He had a chance to talk to John Mateer last week on his show, and again, you ask anyone in the portal business, like what the running price is for a good quarterback. A good quarterback is $1 million. You know, a power 4 quarterback, just maybe not considered good, is $500,000 to like $800,000. So you got Jake Dickert coming out yesterday saying that John Mateer is the best quarterback on the West Coast. Well, what is John Mateer on the open market going to fetch from a team? And can Washington State afford to keep him? All right, so we'll discuss all that today with John Canzano. And, of course, we always wrap up every show with, Hey, What the Puck? There at the end of the Daily Puck Drop. We appreciate you listening, whether you're watching on YouTube, thank you. If you're there, please hit the subscribe button. If you're on X, thank you. And also on the Puck Sports mobile app. If you don't know, we've got a mobile app now. Download it today from the iOS App Store there for your iPhone. And, yeah, if you're listening later, we go every day because a lot of you are listening later on in the afternoon, evening. We go live every day at 10 a.m. All right, let's jump right into it. The news yesterday, in fact, this happened right when we signed off, probably, 25, 30 minutes after we signed off on the show yesterday. They made the somewhat surprising announcement to the Seahawks that they had waived and cut Tyrel Dodson. He's out. And so the two big acquisitions that John Schneider had this offseason, and Tyrel Dodson and Jerome Baker are both gone now. And, we said this again from day one. Never was a long-term solution because of the contracts they gave both these guys. These were one-year deals. So they weren't committed to Dodson and Baker. And then we never really got a sense of both because training camp started or off-season workouts started, and they never were around. They didn't participate in anything. And then I remember seeing these guys for the first time, watch and going, that's the smallest two linebackers I've ever seen, these two guys. They're tiny. And then they start playing. Most of you probably are with me, never was impressed with either one of them. Baker wasn't good. They ship him out. And I wasn't even sold on Dodson. I don't think many people were sold on Dodson. They weren't sold on Dodson. They got rid of him. And this now falls in line with what Schneider said, or not Schneider, but what Mike McDonald said right before the bye, that everything's on the table. And this was what he meant by everything's on the table. So my question to you is this, and I said this yesterday, and I mean, again, there's bad off seasons, and I didn't say definitively so, but this has to rank right up there. If it is not the worst off season for John Schneider, it's right there. I mean, it's there might be some other ones that rank right up there in terms of off seasons, but I don't know how this one actually can be beat. I mean, you decided, and again, I'm not going to be revisionist on this one. I mean, I think I agree with a lot of people that Bobby Wagner, they shouldn't have brought him back, but Bobby Wagner's having a good season with Washington. Okay, maybe it could have helped you guys, but for their system, they didn't want Wagner back. But you replaced Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks, and by the way, Jordan Brooks, according to the analytics, is not having a good season, so. Before anyone says, well, they should have brought Jordan Brooks back, I mean, the numbers would tell you that he's not having a good season. So maybe they were right about not wanting to bring him back, but they did say they wanted to. They had a preference to bring Leonard Williams back and handle that one first. But they never adequately replaced those two guys. They never did. And for an organization that has been blessed for so many years, right, to have such great linebacker play with Wagner and KJ Wright, and my boy, you go even past that before those guys. We talk a lot like Lofa Tatupu and Leroy Hill. I mean, it's been an organization that's had great linebacker play, but not this year. So it's got to rank right up there as one of the worst off seasons for Schneider. I mean, you got your two linebackers, okay? They're gone now, and we're 9 weeks into the season, they're gone. The offensive line mess, and that's what it is because it's a mess. Your drafting of Christian Haynes to this point has not worked out. I mean, so much so that the guy that you drafted last year, Anthony Bradford in the 4th round, is like head and shoulders better than Haynes because Haynes can't even get on the field. So the trying to improve the offensive line didn't work out. Then you throw in the linebacker situation. Then you get to the center, and they ran through a bunch of centers, right? Man, well, let's bring Nick Harris back maybe because Nick Harris had a relationship with Scott Huff. Their time at Washington, well, that didn't work out. I think they ended up trading him back to Cleveland. Oluwatimi, who you selected last year, no, he's not the guy. And he hasn't performed so well that a guy that literally is like on one leg in Connor Williams now is your starting center. And maybe it's the injuries with Connor Williams that it's allowing him to play this way. But Connor Williams isn't the solution right now at center. And I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that he shouldn't be the guy next year. So you have that. You have Laken Tomlinson. He hasn't done anything at left guard. I mean, is he the worst problem? No, but he hasn't done anything. It is a bad offseason for him. A real bad offseason. And again, does it rank as the worst offseason? I mean, that's just subject to debate. Everyone's going to have maybe their worst offseason. But it's right up there. And in terms of what the expectations were for this team, I don't know. I think most people didn't have championship expectations for them. A 9-8 season maybe, 10-7. I don't think many people saw this happening to where they're at right now. And do they have plenty of time to right the ship? Yes, they do. I mean, Jim said it yesterday when he was on the show. What happens if they go down to San Francisco? I mean, we're all burying them this week and talking about tanking for the rest of the season, at least bringing it up. What if they go in next week and beat San Francisco? Well, yeah, we're all hypocrites. This is the up and down nature of this football team and this league. I don't think there's anyone that thinks they're going to go into San Francisco this week and beat them. Okay, and then they got a Cardinals team that's playing better football. It's going to be, I do believe, and I'm just going to repeat a little bit what I said yesterday, just talking about how this could be the worst offseason under John Schneider, is, they go 6-11, and something we brought up with the boys yesterday on the Ground Puck Seahawks podcast, Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree, is like you got to have some hard conversations in the offseason. And no one wants to sit there and lose games on purpose. I mean, no one's advocating for that because, sports is all about winning and winning as many games as you possibly can, right? But there does come a point when winning too much, when you're not going to get in the postseason, is actually going to hurt you. And if you look at what's coming on the horizon for them, okay, they're at the 49ers and they come home against the Cardinals. Cardinals are playing great football. You lose those two games, all of a sudden now you're 4-7. Okay, you have to then at that point run the table. Likelihood, guys and gals, you're not running the table. So if they lose the next two games, as painful as this is, the best case scenario for these guys is to lose all of them. I mean, it really is. As dumb as that sounds, you just don't want to be caught in the middle. And that's what, something that Rob Staten brought up a few weeks ago, who joins us on Wednesdays. He'll join us tomorrow. His point that he was trying to articulate a few weeks ago was, I don't want to be caught in the middle. And Rob's right. You want to be caught in the middle where you're 9-8 or you're 8-9 and you're just missing the playoffs. I think even Rob's point was, even if they're like 9-8 or 10-7, they get into the playoffs in their first round exit, I don't want them to think that they've fixed everything. I mean, and that's where Rob and I just disagreed a little bit, that to me, for them, the goal this year was to get into the playoffs, to win the division. And, in a weird way, do they still have a shot at it? Yes, they do. A few weeks ago, it looked a little bit better. And so at that time, when we had that conversation, I was like, yeah, man, if they've got an opportunity to win it, then they should go out and win the whole thing and win the division. And if they get knocked out in the first round, they get knocked out in the first round. But that would be a coup, I think, for Schneider, and then I think also for Mike McDonald. But things have changed over the last few weeks of where this team is at right now. Does he send a message to the locker room yesterday with Dodson? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that was part of it. Hey, if you don't play the way that we want you to play, this is the message. We'll cut you. We'll get you out of town. This was a similar thing that Carroll and Schneider did, back in 2010. I think there could also be a working theory that they went to Dodson to say, hey, man, we're going to get a little bit more playing time tonight. You might have to take a little bit reduced role. And perhaps maybe at that point, Dodson was like, no, I'm not going to play a reduced role. Played every game, leading the team in tackles. I've been playing good. And maybe there was a disagreement about that. And then so if Dodson says, if you're going to, reduce my playing time, shoot, just get rid of me. Cut me so I can go play someplace else. But their miss on those two guys are massive. I mean, they just are. I mean, as much as the offensive line has been a focus this year for the Seahawks, and rightfully so, and criticizing what they have not done, a lot of criticism has got to be placed on John Schneider for not replacing two linebackers that were productive for you. And, your last year's storyline is the same storyline this year. They can't stop the run. Can't stop the run because they don't have two linebackers that can make plays. I think without a shadow of a doubt, you go into this next offseason, probably the most important offseason John Schneider's ever had since he took over the team. He's got to get some stuff right. Because lately, unfortunately, he's had too many misses. And you start piling up misses, then, organization's going to take a longer look at you. And I think he's got a long leash anyways. But, at some point, ownership is going to want results for going along with the decision to move on. It's not only moving on from Wilson. You chose Carroll over Wilson. Okay? And then you got to do a decision. Okay, we're still sputtering. So now what is it? Well, we chose Schneider over Carroll. What's the next option? If they can't get out of this, well, the next option for ownership will be, well, we'll find a new GM that can come in. I mean, that's just how things will go. I mean, he no doubt can turn it around. But this offseason is going to be massive for him. Where they're going to be out in the draft. I know people say it's not a good draft. But I'll be honest with you, if they lose the next 2 weeks, me as a fan, then I would want them to lose all the rest of their games so they can just improve their draft stock. And again, it doesn't make you a bad fan. It just makes you, they never get this opportunity to pick high. They don't. And this would be staring them in the face in order to pick high. If it doesn't go right the next 2 weeks, against two division opponents. Because one, it's 2 more losses, but it's also 2 more losses in the division. It's something we talked about yesterday with Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree on the Ground Puck podcast, which we do every Monday, by the way, at 11 o'clock. Go and listen to it, watch it, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Where, we had the discussion about Geno Smith's future. Like, if you get into the offseason and you start saying to yourself, yeah, maybe we should be in a rebuild. If you do acknowledge that and say that is the course of action we want to take, what's the point of keeping him around?
To make a decision like that and go that direction, but you have to realize that there can be consequences if it doesn't go right for you, where you can end up being a team that's in the basement for a long, long time if you don't make those right calls as well. So it's not a flippant call here to just say, okay, we'll move on from Geno, move on from this, and start from the bottom up again, because it's not always that easy. Finding that quarterback can be a tough part, and they've kind of found out that they kind of lucked into another really good one here with Geno for the last couple of years. But they are at a crossroads a little bit with their roster construction and what they're going to do on that front moving forward.
They are on a massive crossroad. And again, I know this will be more of a conversation when we get into the offseason with these guys, but it is a huge decision laying forth for them right now. If they can't somehow turn this around, and maybe they go out there and they beat the Niners because Abe Lucas is back. It solidifies the offensive line and they start playing better football. And then all of a sudden, okay, the expectations change. And that's why, again, I just say the next 2 weeks of how they perform are going to probably dictate how you should root for the rest of the season and what you should expect and what you should want to see for the rest of the season. What they do here in the next 2 weeks against the 49ers, and they come back home there against the Cardinals. I don't think when you start talking about rebuilding and what does rebuild entail, I don't think it's something that takes forever. But along those lines of what we discussed yesterday with about Geno Smith is, and I saw somebody say this online, and it was perfect. It was perfectly said, that he's a good quarterback when you've got a championship caliber team around him. When you're that one piece away. They're not one piece away. I mean, honestly, just does anyone think the Seattle Seahawks are one piece away from winning the whole thing? Because I do believe if you put him on a superior team, Geno Smith, then yeah, they can win a championship. But you tell me, are they one piece away? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, they've got to improve 3/5 of their offensive line. They don't have any linebackers. Well, Ernest Jones, but they need another linebacker. Hopefully Knight can be that guy. I still think there's some question marks along this defensive line for him. I mean, there are a lot of question marks for this team. So to sit there and say, I think if you were a quarterback away, a veteran quarterback away, then he would make sense. But I don't think this team is. And if the next 2 weeks go in a certain direction for them, then yes, they're going to have to seriously not consider bringing him back. But Curtis is right. Listen, man, you make that decision. You start going down a road where could be misery. I mean misery. If you don't have a quarterback, it sucks. But the other thing too is you have so much money locked up in players next season. And if you have all that money locked up into players, why would it make sense then to commit even more money to a quarterback when you've acknowledged yourself that you're not that one piece away? Let's talk more NFL, more Seahawks, more fantasy football, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, look at the hat. Danny Kelly, senior staff writer, Ringer Fantasy Football Show, Ringer NFL Draft Show. His weekly appearance all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by 2 diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years, makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodhisattva IPA, host of your other favorite beers. Their tap room is open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. Hey, I want you to pick up there, Danny.
Yeah.
The offseason decision. I know we're 9 games in. We got half the season to go. And I know we discussed this a little bit last week. But I'll pose the same question I just kind of asked the audience. Do you think they're one player away, the Seahawks I'm speaking of, one player away from winning a Super Bowl?
No. One player, no, I don't think so. I think
one piece away.
No, I don't. I think like there's a world in which they could make a couple of moves. They could have a good draft class, and that makes them a much stronger contender for the Super Bowl. But like if you're talking about just like trading for someone or going out and signing like one big player, no, not really. I think there's just too many pieces, too many moving pieces right now that they need to work on.
Because, I mean, that's what I was talking about yesterday with Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree was, if you get into this, and let's say we were just operating under the hypothetical, they're 6-11. They go 6-11.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, at that point, I think the DK stuff will be back on the table, whether or not they're going to trade him. They'll have to make a decision because it's one or two things. You're either going to trade him or you're going to sign him to a long-term deal. And then what do you do with the quarterback? And do you want to commit? Can this organization commit the money that it would take to re-sign him if you still have, a hole at left guard, a hole at center, a hole at right guard? And at this point, Dan, as you and I are talking, we don't know what we're going to get with the right tackle situation with Abe Lucas. Can they afford to do that in the offseason? I mean, I think that's a legitimate question.
Yeah. There's so many questions with this team. I mean, you said 6-11. I don't even know if that's insultingly low or if that's like realistic. I'm still kind of on the fence on what that feels like.
So you're trying to find the 2 more wins?
I'm like, are they going to get, because I think their over under was 7.5 this past year, and I was like offended by that. I'm like, man, I hope they get over that. So I don't have to like walk back any of my takes, because I always thought they'd be a much better team than that. I still think they could still get over 8 or get to 8 wins, but I think what makes this team hard to evaluate and to figure out is just like they look so different every week. It feels like, that Falcons game, they look pretty good. They look like a pretty good team, a team that was like going in the right direction. And then, of course they just kind of regress or look really sloppy in other games. And, you start to wonder what the plan is here. You start to wonder how they're ever going to get the offensive line fixed. If the defense is going to come together. So there's a lot of moving pieces, like I said. And I don't really have a strong feel for, this coaching staff and all of that. There's too many moving pieces for me to like really figure this team out.
What did the Dodson move yesterday mean to you? What did that represent?
Probably not buying in. I don't know. That was the first thing that came to my mind, was like not getting buy-in, not being the type of leader that they wanted him to be, or something along those lines. I don't have any inside information on what happened there, but my first thought was just like, oh, this is a symbolic thing where they're just like, okay, if you're not going to buy in, if you're not going to be part of the future of this team or whatever, then we're going to get rid of you. What was your take on that?
I think similar to that. I think it was also maybe they went to him and just said, hey, we might go into, have you play a little reduced role, maybe play night a little bit more. And then he's like, no, I'm not signing up for that. F you, man.
Right.
I'm leading the team in tackles and starting every game. No. And maybe it was a little bit of that. And then he wasn't open to that idea. Or it was just simply, hey, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's the easiest explanation sometimes, Danny. Maybe it was just, hey, this guy is not playing the style we want.
Right.
Let's just pull the plug on it now. Let him have a fresh start. We drafted Knight for a reason. Let's see if we can get Knight up and running. But it's the thing is they knew, when they made these moves, Danny, they knew what type of system he ran. So why did they sign these 2 guys? That's what that's the thing that I'm trying to like. I know they're getting a lot of praise like yesterday and today. Well, the Seahawks are, one of these organizations, they know that when they made a mistake, they'll pull the plug on it immediately and not further the mistake.
Right.
But the mistake was if you saw these guys play, you saw their film in Buffalo and Miami, could you not see that they wouldn't fit your system that you wanted to run? I don't know.
That's why I think it's more of a personality thing, personally. And again, like I said, I'm not operating off of any inside info. I'm just kind of like reading between the lines here. Like when you have that type of surprising sort of mid-season weird move, It just feels like there was like some tension between like what they were expecting from him and what they're getting from him, and it was just like maybe they're making an example of him or whatever
Sure.
whatever happened behind the scenes. I don't know, but it's like weird timing, especially since he's like their starter and they don't have a lot of depth at the position like already. It's like the thinnest spot on the roster, and they just released their starters. There's something going on there. I have to believe.
Well, because you got Knight, who you drafted, but then the other guy I've never heard of before. The Thomas guy? Where the hell's that guy? I mean, I never even heard of this guy. Drake Thomas? Yeah, you're right. I mean, they've got no depth at a position in which he tells everyone, does McDonald, like, hey, man, this is like, we ask a lot of our linebackers. And now we're gonna ask a lot of our rookie linebacker, to come out and perform. So, it's weird because we talked about this last week and, a little bit even today is that, will they get in the offseason and start thinking rebuild? And I was thinking about this week. I'm like, you know what? They're already in a rebuild. They were in a rebuild this past offseason when they fired Carroll and hired McDonald. That was the start of the rebuild.
Right.
They're
You just
already
can't call it. You can't call it that. Everybody wants to use some euphemism. A reset season.
A reset. Oh. What did DePoto always
like
use?
that.
Reimagine.
I love the corporate jargon that you get into when you're talking about this type of stuff. I mean, I think right now what's very clear is the Seahawks are not a Super Bowl caliber team. And I guess like you could like what else is there at this point? Like you have to be honest with yourselves about like what you can do and who you can be. And I think the Seahawks probably know they're not going to win a Super Bowl this year. That's why they're moving on from Dodson. That's why they want to get some of their young guys probably more snaps. It's I think that they probably are aware of who they are. It's just you can't say it out loud.
Yeah. Okay, so I think these next 2 weeks are pivotal as for fans and how they should root these next 2 weeks. If they lose the next 2 weeks, I mean, we can wrap it up. I mean, because I know I still think there's a belief and there still is a shred of hope that, hey man, they could go into San Francisco and maybe knock them out. And maybe the Abe Lucas return is all they needed, Danny. But if they lose, to the Niners and they come back home and they lose to a Cardinals team that's playing great football right now.
I know they're playing really well right now.
So you're 4-7. I mean, at that point, to even have a shot, you'd have to run the table.
Right.
Okay, so they're not going to do that. Doesn't it, as a fan, as much as this sucks, as much as you like to put, Blue Friday and paint your face and get hammered, shit-faced drunk on Sundays, you know what you need? You need them to lose the remaining games of the season.
This is a weird, right? It's a weird place to be. I think there's a huge difference between knowing what you need or knowing what's good for you and like actually feeling it in deep in your soul. You know what I mean? Like it's really, especially for a team that's had so much success over the last like decade plus. It's like, I always joke with my co-host of my podcast, Danny Heifetz, that the whole time I've known him, basically since 2016, he's just always been rooting for the Giants to lose, even though like he's a Giants fan. He's like, there's been like 1 year where they went to the playoffs, I think, since I've known him. Every other year, he's like, come on, man, we got to lose. Like, we got to get a better draft pick. It's just like this perpetual thing. It's like, Seahawks fans haven't really experienced that for a really long time. There's always kind of like hope. There's always the chance that could be a plucky team that gets on a hot streak late in the season. And of course, there is still that hope right now. I think their offense is good enough, and their defense last week looked like encouraging. So like maybe there's something to work with here. But if they lose the next 2 games, then chances are really, really low. And ultimately, like it's probably better that they lose games. I do think that there's something to building a culture, building confidence in like the coaching staff and coming together as a team where if you're losing a bunch of games, that's not going to help.
No,
like
the
draft pick. The draft pick is not as important as establishing some like culture and toughness and like grit, I guess, for lack of a better
finishing
word.
strong, playing
Yeah,
good. Your ideas, your program, your culture is working. Danny,
buy-in. Yeah.
That's for smart people. Like, I'm a dumb person. Like, I what you just said is 100% right. I look at it as I just want the shiny toy in the draft pick.
Right.
You know, whoever that is. And now you're going to tell me. I mean, a lot of the work you do at the Ringer is covered in the draft. How is the draft this year?
I would call it like a meat and potatoes draft. It's going to be like
Okay.
offensive linemen, defensive linemen.
Oh, wait, stop. Isn't that what they need?
I mean, yeah, it's great. I think it's actually like it lines up well with assuming that we don't move on from Geno Smith. I don't, the quarterback situation in this draft is right now, as it looks, not great. Like, it's not like a super strong class.
Who's the best one in your opinion right now?
It comes down to probably Cam Ward. And for me, Garrett Nussmeier. You're a Cam Ward guy, I assume.
Yes and no. I just
a little bit hurt that he left.
Hurt, not so much hurt. I just didn't. He was so at Wazoo. He was so frustrating because there'd be plays that he'd make that you'd be like, oh my god, like that's an NFL throw. But then there'd be these other plays where he'd like fall back and he would drift back and he would take like these 25-yard sacks or throw against the, roll to his left, throw back against the field and a pick. And you're like, what are you doing?
I think that's the story of this draft, though. At quarterback, it's like, you can say the same. Like Shadur Sanders, I think is probably going to be up there, but he's like sick. He's like barely 200 pounds, 6'1". I don't know if he's like has these elite traits necessarily. Okay. So I think there's going to be a ton of question marks about him. I think Garrett Nussmeier from LSU is definitely pretty interesting. But I mean, all these guys, all the quarterbacks in this class have like had really up and down seasons. Yeah. Carson Beck came into the season. Carson Beck, Georgia quarterback, came in as probably like the de facto number one of the class, and he's probably like a day 2, day 3 pick now. If he comes out, he might. I'm not
sold on Beck because he has weird tattoos on his arms, and I'm not sold on a white quarterback with weird tattoos.
Old school, yeah.
Just I don't know. He doesn't do it for me. It's such a.
It's you remind me of like the scouts from Moneyball.
Yeah,
bad totally. Face.
Bad face.
Have you seen his girlfriend? His girlfriend's not very attractive.
Well, I think some of that stuff's important. Funny that you brought up Moneyball I'm sick and I'm dealing with the flu and I fell asleep last night, like early in the evening, watching Moneyball. What a great movie! Like Moneyball is when it comes on, you just got to watch it. It's like that, Shawshank and Hoosiers. Can I just? Yeah. I want to circle back to Shadur just for a quick second because I'm not like I'm really. Like hot and cold with him sometimes because there's some stuff that he does that really like irritates me. Like he got into it this last week with a ball boy for Texas Tech because the guy was trying to get the ball back because it's theirs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And like he got in his face like, dude, what are you doing? Like he's just trying to get the ball back. But there was a game that I watched this year against Kansas State. Kansas State ends up winning in Boulder. But all of his wide receivers are knocked out of the game. Hunter gets hurt. Either Hunter doesn't play in that game or gets hurt early on. And then the other kid, who I'm blanking on, is it Horn, who is his second best wide receiver, gets knocked out in the game. So he's down all of his targets. And he damn near leads a comeback. Mm-hmm. And he is sitting in the pocket. He's getting the shit kicked out of him, but he's delivering ball after ball. And I just remember watching that game that night going, maybe
something there. Yeah.
If you take away all the other drama with him, the Dion.
But you can't.
I know, but maybe get him out of Dion. Are him and Dion going to be a package deal together?
That's like I think the fear with probably some teams is like, okay, who like the head coach going to sign off on this when you got like Dion potentially coming for your job or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's just like there's baggage with Sanders that some teams might not be into, especially considering relative to I think like his physical traits like being pretty average. I don't know. It's bottom line, like to round out like the whole discussion. Like I think this is a weird quarterback class. Like I don't think any of the guys in this quarterback class are going to be anywhere near like the Drake May, Caleb Williams, and why am I blanking on his name? He's the most famous person, Jaden Daniels. There's like that class to me, I think is like head and shoulders above what we're going to see in 2025. But like, you never know. There's still enough time for someone to kind of emerge, but yeah, I think that this class will be down there, and it's just gonna be like offensive line, defensive line. There's some interesting pass rushers. There's some interesting corners. There's definitely like a handful of receivers that I like, and a bunch of really good running backs actually. But I don't know. I don't think Seahawks fans need to be tripping too much about like getting really high pick in the draft. Like I don't know if it's like necessarily worth it to like tank in this draft particular.
Well, I mean, in a couple of weeks, if they do lose, I mean, I'll start the campaign.
Yeah.
I'll wear it for everyone.
That's fair.
Imagine getting the number 1 pick. You get Travis Hunter. You can play him both ways. It'd be great.
I mean, that would be fun. That would be a lot of fun.
You brought up Caleb Williams' name.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who could have saw this one happening, coming to fruition? Shane Waldron's going to, not be a good offensive coordinator and then ultimately gets fired yesterday. We talk a lot about this, and, as we get closer to the draft, we'll probably talk more about it, Danny, it's and you know this, it's so much about fit. It's so much about where the guy gets drafted, the quarterback.
Yeah.
It's got to be, the system's got to be right. And I still just, for the life of me, what the Bears were doing, why did they keep this coach? Why did they do it? What was the point?
I think honestly, it's because the defense was good down the stretch last year. And I think they wanted a little bit of like continuity from that. But I think it's classic Bears. They just chose the wrong coach. I think Waldron, I never really understood the Waldron hiring. And it's funny because I think they interviewed some of the like hottest offensive coaches of the season, like Cliff Kingsbury. I think they interviewed Liam Cohen. They interviewed, who's been doing really good things in Tampa Bay. There's a handful of other guys. Kubiak with New Orleans. They interviewed him. So there's like they ended up just picking like the guy who did by far the worst. And I think like obviously there is some blame to be placed on Caleb Williams' shoulders, like for the struggles they're having in this offense. Like he just does not look like the same passer that he did last year.
He just looks scared.
He's just not. He's like really just struggling. There's I think a lot of things going on. His accuracy is just all over the place. He's forcing the ball. He's just not playing loose. I saw Daniel Jeremiah said this the other day, and I think it really resonated with me. It's essentially he's just like he's not being aggressive. He's not playing like the quarterback that he was in college, where that was like the identity of who he was. He's like going out, gripping it, rip it, and he's playing like to not make mistakes in this offense. And the irony of that is like the offense is doing absolutely nothing. They haven't scored a touchdown in like 3 games. So I don't know. There's something going on with Caleb Williams, obviously like a confidence thing, like a chemistry thing. But I think big picture, like you said, there's a lot of moving parts. I think the offensive scheme was not built to accentuate his strengths whatsoever. The offensive line is a disaster. And what we thought looked like a good receiving core has turned out to be like a net negative, I think, overall for the Bears. Like DJ Moore, I don't know if you've noticed, but like his vibes are out of control bad this year. Like his body language is terrible. There's been a couple plays I've noticed where he like, there's one play like 2 weeks ago where he like went out of bounds in the middle of a play and like stood on the sideline in the middle of a play. And then there was another play I noticed earlier in the season where he like just didn't come back in for a key third down in the game. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? I think DJ Moore like hates Caleb Williams. I think Keenan Allen is probably washed at this point. And then, I think the signing of DeAndre Swift has looked pretty good in retrospect, but like a running back is not going to make a huge difference if the offensive line sucks. So yeah, I don't know. It's just, and then Rome Odunze, I think he's gonna be good, but he's just coming along as a rookie. So I don't know. I think what we thought on paper looked like a really good support system prior to the season. I did too. I fell for that. I fell into that. I thought this was going to be like a really good situation for him. None of it has worked out. Offensive play caller disaster, offensive line disaster. The receiving core that we thought was going to be really helpful and good has been sort of the opposite. And all of that combined, like Caleb Williams is just playing horrible and he doesn't have any accuracy, even though he was one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college last year. So it's just an unmitigated disaster. I mean, his numbers are awful. It's starting to like creep into my mind that he might be a bust, even though I do still believe in him. It's tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's so much talent there. I think you got to nail whoever the next guy is, whoever the next offensive mind is. You got to hire him, get the best one available, give him the job, and let him turn around. There's just too much talent there with Caleb Williams. Did you happen to see, speaking of Eberflus, his interview yesterday in Chicago.
Where he was cutting out, his cell phone was cutting out.
This is the funniest thing.
Yeah.
And especially the host. I don't know if this is the Bears flagship. I'm going to assume it is because rarely does the head coach ever go
Just
on
call into a random
radio show. So I'm assuming this is the flagship. But this is Matt Eberflus going on the flag. I'm going to assume the flagship in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he's having cell phone problems.
All those experiences.
The
guy on the left.
Coach?
Is the best.
He's losing his mind.
Coach, your cell phone's as bad as the offense right now. All right, we'll put them on hold and see if we can reestablish.
The best is the look on the guy on the right looking at his co-host like, dude, did you just say that? Like, we're never going to get the guy on again, man. He's not going to ever come on.
And then he's like, we're trying to reestablish contact.
We're trying to reestablish contact. This guy on the left is like, F this guy, man. He is a train wreck. I got to play it again. I just love the...
Look at the body language. Oh God.
Coach, your cell phone's as bad as the offense right now. All right, we'll put them on hold and see if we can reestablish.
See if we can reestablish.
Do you know who that guy, the white guy is? I don't know who that is.
I don't know who these guys are.
He was on one. He was like, "Can we get him a landline? It's 2024."
Oh, God, it's so good. So good. Yeah, just a train wreck there. Then you talk about, Kingsbury. I thought Kingsbury. Yeah, there's the thing about Kingsbury. That guy's going to get another head coaching job easily in this league with what he's doing with Jaden Daniels. Now, whether he deserves it or not, I don't know, but he's going to get one for sure.
I mean, I think he does. I think the offense that they're running makes a lot of sense for what they're trying to accomplish and what their quarterback does well. So it's funny because like this is just a perfect example of why the NFL is so unpredictable. I feel like is the Commanders in the offseason sort of by default ended up with Dan Quinn. It felt like they wanted everybody else.
Right,
and then they're like, okay, well, I guess Dan Quinn still doesn't have a job. So we'll hire him.
We'll take him. And now you're like,
people were like sad about it.
I got somebody asking me right now, would you trade him right now? Would you trade Quinn and Kingsbury for McDonald and Grubb? I'm like, yeah, but does Jaden Daniels come along?
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
Jaden Daniels does the quarterback. Yeah. Hey, before you go, it's fantasy football. It's waiver wire Tuesday. What do you got for every one of us out there struggling with guys out, running backs done, receivers done? Who's a hot pickup this week?
Not a lot of great pickups this week. I think Audric Estime for the Broncos kind of came out of nowhere this past week and was the starter. He got like 80% of the snaps or whatever it was in 14 carries. And so he looks like the guy for them going forward. And obviously Sean Payton could change his mind and sort of ride the hot hand, but Audric Estime at the running back position is the big one for me. Trey Benson for the Cardinals is a good stash. I think he started to come on and look a little bit better. And with the way that James Conner runs, just pure violence at all times. If he misses any time, I think Trey Benson's going to have a ton of value. And then at the receiver position, Ricky Pearsall, I thought looked pretty impressive. And in past rookie receivers have always had really good second halves of the season. Like that's been like one of the most bankable things in fantasy football over the last like 3 or 4 years is like rookie receivers getting their feet under them and having a really good second half of the season. So he could have some value as the number 3 there in San Francisco, and Deebo's always hurt, so maybe even the number 2. And then Mike Williams, good stash, just to see kind of how everything kind of goes with this Russell Wilson thing. And if Mike Williams is the number 2 there opposite Pickens, I think he's going to get a lot of opportunities. They're going to throw him the ball in the end zone a lot. That's kind of Russell Wilson's thing, and so he could be an interesting stash player. I wouldn't play him right now just because they're still kind of like getting him ingrained in the offense. And then at tight end, Mike Gesicki for the Bengals. As long as T. Higgins is out, this guy is a huge part of this Bengals offense, and there's no quarterback basically right now. I guess Lamar Jackson and maybe Jaden Daniels playing better than Joe Burrow. So trying to get a piece of that offense, I think, is always a good thing. If Higgins is out, Gesicki is a must start in fantasy.
Okay. All right, we started this a few weeks ago. Before you go, we're put somebody on the barge. We put somebody on the barge. They go out to the Pacific Ocean. They never get to come back unless we get to bring them back, and unless we decide to bring them back on the tugboat. And we got a brand new little soundbite too for it. There you go. There's the barge. There's the barge. The barge is So Danny,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, who are you putting on the barge this week?
I am putting one Jerry Jones on the barge. Jerry Jones has lost his marbles. I'm pretty convinced right now, like, they need to do the Biden thing and replace him somehow.
Yeah.
At the 11th hour. He's losing it. This sun thing, the sun in the stadium at Cowboy Stadium is like the funniest story in football to me right now, because every week it feels like, I know it's not every week, but it feels like every week the Cowboys are like bungling a play badly because someone is just blinded by the sun that comes into the stadium, which is totally predictable, and they could have known this. And for whatever reason, they refuse to put up curtains, even though they do put curtains up in concerts and things of that nature.
And even when McCarthy does his press conference, they put it up.
Oh my God. You can't script this. You can't write it.
All right. So Jerry Jones on the barge. I
on
love
the
it.
barge.
And he can come back. I'm going to put on, I'm going to play it again. There's the barge. There it is. He can come back. And maybe for a few weeks. I'm going to put John Schneider on the barge for a few weeks.
I like it.
Schneider's on the barge for a few weeks for just mishandling this linebacking situation in this offseason. Just a bad offseason for
Schneider.
The
O-line, man.
And the O-line. He can come back, though. He can come back for sure. All right, Danny. Appreciate it. Danny Kelly with us every week, senior staff writer, Ringer Fantasy Football Show, Ringer NFL Draft Show. His weekly appearance all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. Check out the website, georgetownbeer.com. Tap room open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Follow Danny on Twitter, Danny B. Kelly. Check out his episode up on YouTube. Please hit the subscribe button. Also, listen to it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. And, of course, up at pucksports.com. Thanks, Danny. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, sounds good.
There he is, Danny Kelly. We go from the National Football League. He's waiting in the bullpen right now. Ladies and gentlemen, John Canzano joins us right now. JohnCanzano.com. All brought to you by Zeke's Pizzas. We make the transition to college football. Best selection of pizzas and local Northwest craft beers. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com. Follow John on Twitter, John Canzano, BFT. Read his work at JohnCanzano.com. Listen to the radio show, The Bald Face Truth in Portland, Oregon, 750 The Game. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How you doing, man? I feel like I need a walk-up song since I'm coming out of the bullpen. Is that right?
Yeah, you do need a walk. What would your walk-up song be?
I don't know. I'm not like a big hard rock guy, but I feel like that sets mood. Like if you're, coming into AC/DC and you're coming out of the bullpen, the crowd gets into that. So I'd go with something like that, probably.
Yeah, that's good. You got to have something. You got to come up with something.
All right.
I want to start with this. You had him on your show last week, John Mateer.
Yeah.
And he's an engaging young man. He's just he's an easy conversation. He's a very good quarterback. You got Jake Dicker coming out yesterday telling the press, listen, he's the best quarterback on the West Coast. I'm curious. There is going to be, and it's already started, a bidding war to try to get him in the portal. And no doubt it's probably already started. He's being contacted, I would assume. I don't know if he has an agent or what, or someone that's working with him. What is the price tag for someone like John Mateer in the portal?
Yeah, it's interesting because when the portal first started, remember Cam Ward was one of those first guys that came to Washington State, and I put the first number. I was trying to get a number on what does a quarterback cost, and that's when the portal first opened. He was coming from Incarnate Word to Pullman, Washington, and Cam Ward got $90,000. The package was a $90,000 package. It was a truck. It was some walking around money. It was the use of an apartment. It was some airline tickets for his parents. Wow. We've now seen that escalate where, guys are getting $1 million, now $2 million. You sort of look at Dylan Gabriel's package at Oregon. I saw a number out there at $2 million. So I would have to think John Mateer is $1 million guy, right? $750,000 to $1 million guy. And so if you're Washington State and you're Jake Dicker, you either have to come up with that money or you have to come up with the sales pitch to Mateer and enough money that makes him believe that he is, better off staying right there in Pullman where he is featured and they understand him and they believed in him when maybe some others did not. But that's the reality of this world today. And I'm curious to see how this revenue sharing thing is going to go over when you've got, a roster that is going to be about a $20 to $23 million roster in the top schools. How is that money going to be allocated? I think we can gather some of that intel by looking at the NFL rosters, and the quarterbacks are getting paid. It's going to be quarterbacks, it's going to be pass rushers and defensive tackles, and then cover corners, and then the rest of the guys.
Package deal. I mean, I heard someone on social media saying, what if Mateer and Arbuckle were a package deal? I would take it a step further. What if it were Mateer and Dickert?
Yeah, I think those things are scary for Washington State, and they're realities in this world. Now, I will say this. I don't think the coaching carousel is going to deliver us as many openings as we see in other years. I think that a lot of the schools, I'm talking to ADs who are saying they're going to play it close to the vest. They expect the other schools to do the same thing because there's so much uncertainty with how you're going to allocate scholarships. How are you going to pay for all this stuff in the new world? The last thing you want to be doing is having, a buyout for a coach you've just fired sitting on your books. And it's why I'm kind of looking at Lincoln Riley at USC, and I'm going, does he get a little benefit of the doubt if he doesn't end up, segueing to your last segment with the Chicago Bears or somewhere like that? Does USC have a little more patience with Lincoln Riley because, hey, they know they're going to be revenue sharing soon. That's $88 million that they don't have. So I kind of think that the jobs will be more limited. But yeah, Arbuckle and Mateer, or Dickert and Mateer, become kind of scary realities for Washington State right now.
You talked to him, like as I mentioned before. You talked to him last week. You get a sense that he would leave, that he would hit the portal.
I don't know. I think I stopped trying to guess what 19, 20, 21-year-old kids are thinking a long time ago. I have one of those in my own household. Look, this stuff blows in the wind sometimes, but you have to figure out what that kid's love language is. He was a high school baseball player. He seems to have roots in Texas, right? So I think it's, Texas A&M calls. I think you could be in some trouble. But I did sense some loyalty from him. And Washington State was a school that bet on him, and now has handed him the keys very young, and he's having the kind of success that people are noticing. The problem is if you go 11-1 and you don't make the playoff, you know what those other coaches are going to be telling John Mateer, hey, you're not getting seen. You can't get in the playoff there. Why are you staying there another year? So I think it becomes more and more important tonight when these rankings come out again that Washington State takes some steps forward in that ranking that, sort of alleviates a little bit of that. But, the collective's got to get its act together. And I think Oregon State showed this, all the players they lost, and Damian Martinez. You have to be super proactive as a collective and as a school. You've got to go after Jake Dickert now. You've got to go after Mateer now, and you've got to sell those guys now on what they can get.
Can these collectives afford something like that?
I don't know. That's the question. And the retention piece at Washington State is, I think, one of the great stories of this season.
Yeah.
Aside from Cam Ward, what Jake Dickert did was remarkable. I mean, he kept guys there when you wouldn't have expected it. Like, he had no conference. They had an idea of where they wanted to play. They didn't have a conference championship available to them. They didn't have a TV deal, and he kept that together. And so I don't know. There's something to what Jake Dickert's selling internally that's working. So I think you have to lean into that if you're Washington State, and that collective has got to say, all right, go out to the donors. And, are there donors out there that want to keep it together? I have talked to Washington State donors who are texting me saying, we need to move now. So I think there's some motivation and some understanding in the fan base. And these are big donors. There's some understanding there that they have to be proactive, and there's going to be an expense to this if they want to keep it together.
Here's what give him a wheat farm out in the Palouse, and he gets to keep all the profits. Just give
Why not?
The Mateer wheat farm. He's got a barbecue deal with Miss Huddy's. Isn't that enough? That would be enough for me.
It's enough for you and I. But here, there a lot of these collectives too are doing deals where, you get vested as the quarters come along, and I could see a deal. He gets 10 acres in the first quarter, and then 10 more. You got to tier it for him, keep him around. It's the mistake Oregon State made, I think, with Damian Martinez. It was a $400,000 deal. They gave him $100,000 a quarter. Yeah. In spring, he said, "I'm staying." Of course, he was staying to pick up the check, Puck. Like it was $100,000 there. As soon as he got the check, he was out to Miami.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you make of, if maybe people didn't see it, Trent Bray's comments? He's the head coach at Oregon State, and he was pressed on it this week. What is it going to cost? What's it cost you to field the team? And he's like, finally at the end, he's like, millions. Where are they at right now? Is Oregon State teetering on I don't want a collapse, but where are they at with their collective and roster retention?
Well, I asked Rick Neuheisel this question because I had a chance to talk with him. And I said, look, let's look at Jed Fish at Washington, Brent Brennan at Arizona, and Trent Bray at Oregon State, all first-year coaches. And Neuheisel immediately went to the fact that, like, Washington has got resources. They will figure it out. They'll find out Jed's going to be okay. He's got proof of performance. At Arizona, he's still in a Power 4 conference. So Bray has the disadvantage of not only being a first-year head coach, but he's the only one in America that didn't have a conference to belong to and had the uncertainty swirling and lost so much of his roster for players who jumped to other schools, including USC and LSU and others. Like, he lost good players to Miami. And so all of a sudden, you see that the cupboard's bare. Anytime he has an injury, it's a huge drop off. He's playing players that should not be on the field. And in the collective, I reached out during the game the other day to Kyle Bornstead, who is the co-founder of the Damnation Collective. And I said, all right, give me an idea of where you are. And he said, we feel good. We feel like the fan base understands the mission. But the problem that you have at Oregon State that doesn't exist at Washington State is you don't have proof of performance to get people excited. And we know damn well what makes people open the checkbook. It's wins. It's the idea that, okay, we're a 10-win team. How much better could we be if I give a little more? But when you are a 4-win, 5-win, trying to get to a 6-win situation like Trent Bray's in, you don't have that proof of performance to sell. And I think it's really difficult to ask those fans, hey, give more, open your pocketbook. We've got a schedule for 2025. They know where they're going to be in 2026, but that is a high wire act and high wins for Trent Bray. And Bray, I'm not sure like he's got the personality to be this great recruiter. So he needs that collective. He's going to need to be armed with some money and some proof of performance, because I don't think he can walk into the living room like Dan Lanning or even Jake Dickert, who's selling the slow cooking in the crock pot. Like, Trent Bray can't do that. He doesn't have that. He's a really good defensive coordinator and a good coach. He's figuring out how to be a head coach.
It always felt like that was a hire out of necessity because of where they were at, because of the landscape of the sport, that he's a good coordinator, but maybe he's not going to be the guy. Now, again, that's just an early jump to a conclusion, and there's still this season to play out, and we'll see what he can do next season. You brought up the NIL, and I brought this up last week on the podcast I do with Jordan Reffin and Elise Woodward, and you'll love the name. It's called Puck the Huskies. It's just great. It's really good, and I like saying it every time to them, just to get, because I know it gets under their skin. But I asked Jordan this, and he seemed to agree a little bit. Why isn't Washington's NIL bigger? I mean, they are one of, I don't know, you tell, how many universities are inside a city? And then a city that's top 12 media market, and then a city that has this much wealth in it with the tech industry and all that. You would think that they would have one of the best NILs, the Smart Lake Futures, around with all these Fortune 500 companies. But Jordan says, no, it's not really the case. It's not really the deal. Why?
I think if you look at sort of the rise of the NIL transfer era and you put it on a chart, like a timeline, you said, okay, here's when NIL was introduced, and you line that up with the turnover that Washington had at the head coaching position, going from a huge letdown when Chris Peterson left into Jimmy Lake, which was not what fans signed up for, into hiring an underwhelming hire at first in Kalen DeBoer, but was sneaky good by Jen Cohen, who ends up having this magical season. I think they were just ready, Puck, to cash in on the NIL front if DeBoer sticks around, because they had shown how close you could get. We were right there. They're going to the Big Ten. They know they're going to need to spend there. And what happens? DeBoer leaves. I know a lot of Husky fans. I have friends who are Husky fans who just were like, I'm done. And they sounded like Oregon State and Washington State fans, oddly, because they emotionally had ridden this roller coaster to the point where they were booking tickets to Houston, seeing this team play, thinking about what it could be, and it ended. It ended really before, the fourth quarter ended and Michael Penix was gone, and then Kalen DeBoer was gone. And so I think they should have been cashing in there. I also think the whole AD mess, going from Jen Cohen to Dannon, how do you as an athletic department keep that congruency of vision when you go from Chris Peterson to Jimmy Lake to Kalen DeBoer to DeBoer is gone? Now you're hiring Fish. Your AD's leaving. I think the NIL piece is lost in there somewhere, and I think that hurt Washington.
Some burnout maybe from fans and alumni.
Sure.
Just burnout. But I guess I'm just getting to like the Boeings of the world and Amazon and Microsoft and Weyerhaeuser. I mean, they are some massive companies in this city, and I just don't. I just don't see it. I just would think it because they have built that up as, and even Fish in his introductory press conference talked about all these companies. He paraded Steve Ballmer around, early practices, and to my knowledge, and maybe I'm incorrect. Somebody maybe at Modeling Futures would correct me, but it doesn't seem like they're having that much of an impact at a school like that with a rich football tradition, a large alumni base, and then sitting in this just unbelievable financial fertile ground that most of these campuses across, Oregon doesn't have that. Eugene's not that. Tuscaloosa's not that. It's just weird. It's just weird why it's not a bigger deal.
Well, and I think, look, in Oregon's case, Oregon punches above its weight because of Phil Knight.
Right.
And Washington's punching under its weight when you look at the corporate sponsorships and the ability there. And I'm not sure Jedd Fisch is the guy to come in and get those Fortune 500 companies all fired up. I mean, they're probably looking at Fisch and going, okay, how long is he going to be here? And so is the rank and file fan who would just be giving $50 or $100 a month because they want to be part of it.
Right.
I look at Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State. He's done a fantastic job riling everybody up, but he's got this relentless enthusiasm and he's got people in the fold. I'm really curious too at Oregon. Rob Mullins, the athletic director at Oregon, sends this email out last Friday where he basically is saying, hey, there's all these new costs. This isn't stuff that we're built for. And it's just weird to hear Oregon talking like that. Right. And I kind of wonder if the Duck fans will open their wallets, because I think all along the typical Duck fan has gone, Phil's got it, right? He's good for it. We don't need to give. It was really odd to hear the athletic director at Oregon sort of going, hey, we might be in some trouble too, and we're going to need you. To the rank and file, 50,000 people they sent that email out to, I think it was probably a little jarring, and I'm curious to see if that will result in people giving willingly. Or are the Ducks going to do what Tennessee is doing and saying, hey, we're going to add 10% to the tickets? I kind of expect that's the direction, because I think most Duck fans are going to go, Phil's got it.
I'm going to stick. Hold on. I'm going to get back to Dan Lanning. I have a Dan Lanning question for you, but I want to get to what was the biggest story in the old conference, but one of the biggest stories in college football. You got Mark Harlan, the Utah's AD, running on the field, yelling at officials, then goes and does a press conference and says that game was stolen from us. Now we got everybody with the Zapruder film, coming out, showing like all different angles of the hold there on the Utah defensive back. You were there. You covered it. That is one of, looking from the outside in, it appears to be one of the best rivalries in college football. Two rabid fan bases. Utah and BYU have always supported football teams. I mean, it's so much that, the uniforms just worked. All red, all blue. It was perfect. What was it like there? What was the scene like afterwards? And then when were you made aware that Harlan had gone to the press conference and gone to the podium and said what he said?
Well, look, I went there because I was like, hey, a lot of rivalries, including the Apple Cup and Civil War, have been hurt by realignment. Even though they're playing the game, it's not the same in week 3. It didn't have the same impact and feel. People who are at the games and the stadiums know what I'm talking about. This realignment thing has killed some tradition. It's killed rivalries. It broke up a 108-year-old conference. But if you look at BYU and Utah, that's a rivalry that is getting an assist from realignment, right? They're in the same conference now. They're going to play. I don't like where it fell on the schedule. It should have been later in the year. I don't like that it was an 8:15 start, but I went to Salt Lake City because I was like, I need to see what this thing's about. I've never seen it, only watched it on TV. And I can tell you, these fan bases are rabid. Like the Utah fan base, even without BYU involved, they were expanding their stadium, 5-6 years ago when everybody else was contracting, right? And saying, oh, we're having attendance problems. Utah had a 5,000 season ticket wait list. And so the Utah fans are going to show up. The BYU fans traveled. It was amazing to see that spectacle and the energy in the building. Then Utah comes out and plays way over its head, playing its best game of the season. I think Utah had that game won. I think anybody who saw that knows that official was looking, like Rick Neuheisel said, he said, you have to be looking for that holding to call that holding because it happened so fast. Quarterback got buried. The play was over. Utah was celebrating. There were 2 snaps in a row that had really weird, controversial things that both went against Utah. BYU goes down, kicks a field goal, wins the game. And, the Utah players were just distraught. Now, I'm there because I want to see this. I'm obviously writing a column. So, I'm paying attention to Kyle Whittingham in the post-game news conference, waiting. And here comes Mark Harlan, the athletic director, and I've never seen this, steps onto the podium and just blisters the Big 12, the officials, the professionalism of the officials. And I loved it from a couple of standpoints. One, it was authentic. You could tell Harlan was really upset. And then his coach, Kyle Whittingham, comes in and he kind of knocks the chair over at the end of his statement.
That was the best.
I'm not going to talk about this, but then proceeds to talk about it. And it was just this great moment where how much this game means to both sides. You have to give credit to BYU, who just kept playing and playing and playing and found a way. But I was looking at Utah, and I felt really bad for the Utes because I think they got robbed. There's a clear conflict of interest when you have a Big 12 officiating crew working a Big 12 game. It's got an undefeated Big 12 team playing in it. That everybody's going, are they going to get leapfrogged by Boise State if they lose a game? And so I think there's a real conflict of interest there that creates more perception maybe than reality. But it was an unfortunate situation. And Neuheisel's idea is to centralize the officiating, take it away from the conferences, remove this pressure for the Big 12 officials to kind of call it the BYU's way in the end of the game. Just get that out of there, get it out of the ACC, get it out of everywhere, and centralize the officiating. But man, I turned to Bill Riley, who's the voice of Utah sports at the end of a game as I'm leading the building. And I'm like, are they all like this? Is this every Holy War? It was just a circus.
Do you think Brett Yormark had a conversation with them before the game?
No, but I think, look, I've talked to officials and they're well aware of the stakes, just like the NBA officials. They're well aware of the stakes and what's going on in the game. And I kind of wondered, my perception was that it was not a penalty. I watched it 6-7 times on replay. I saw it live. I was confused by it because the quarterback was immediately sacked. It should have been no call or pick the flag up once the official talks to his other officials and say, hey, man, he was never getting that pass off. But it was a little handsy, but it wasn't a hold in my view. But I do think the officials are going into that situation knowing that that's an undefeated BYU team and that the conference has not just $6 million at stake for making the playoff, but an additional $6 million if they get a bye. There's a $12 million payoff that comes from BYU going undefeated, Puck. And so I don't know how the officials are calling that game without thinking, I need to give BYU every fair shake I can give them, every benefit of the doubt here, because they're about to lose to a 4-4 Utah team that is going to spoil their season. And gosh, just give them a fair shake becomes like Rick Neuheisel's comment. He said, you have to be looking for that call to throw that flag. And so I do think that side judge or back judge or whoever threw that flag was looking for the call, going, okay, I need to watch for defensive holding here, because you don't throw that penalty unless you're looking for it.
All I thought about for Brett Yormark was, his relationship or his dancing with the World Wrestling Federation, where he wanted to bring them all under. And that's what I thought of. That was a Vince McMahon move. We're going to decide the outcome before the game is over, so we can ensure that we at least have one team that represents us. Now, then the Harlan, he goes off about it was stolen from us. Hey, we were excited about coming to and I'm watching this, and he's like, we were excited about coming to the Big 12, not so much excited anymore. And I'm like, hey, if I had Teresa Gould's phone number, hey, Teresa, let's call him now. You never know. Explain to people, we've gone over this many, many times, but they don't have an exit fee in the Big 12. If they want to leave, they could leave.
Yes.
Do you think there's ever a chance that they could come back, or do they leave that open because they want to go someplace else?
I think they want to go to the Big 10. I think that was the design of it. Now, while they don't have an exit fee, they do have a grant of rights that gets them $30 million a year in media rights money. And so, there's a penalty for giving that up that isn't cheap. So, you talk about, going to the Pac-12 and getting best case scenario 10 or 12 million, right? Like pipe dream scenario. So there's a stiff penalty to that, but it does leave the door open. And I was talking to several other writers at Rice-Eccles Stadium on that night, on Saturday night, and we were debating whether Oregon State and Washington State have it better. Think about this: Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State. Just think of those three. Think about the next 5 years and the access to the playoff that they're going to have, where
100%.
You win your conference championship, you're going to the playoff. And the conference is now going to get $6 million if you make the first round, another $6 million if you go to the quarterfinal. There's a chance there at $18 or $20 million for advancing into the playoff. But I think that we're going to see, much like in basketball, where schools will say, we went to the Final Four, and they celebrate that. I think you're going to see it with this playoff. We made the playoff will become a banner inside your stadium. Playoff appearances by Washington State, 3 or 4. But if you're Washington State, Oregon State, Boise State, you've got better access to the playoff than half of the Big 12, 3/4 of the Big 10, 3/4 of the SEC. You start thinking about, just from that standpoint, not from the media rights money, not from sustainability long-term, but just for access to the playoff, you're living a better life maybe being in the Pac-12. And so does that become appealing to somebody at some point? And can you start to piecemeal together a better media rights package if you're the Pac-12 by picking off Big 12 or ACC schools that are looking over and going, you know what? We can go to the playoff there. We have no shot in our conference.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I mean, and I 100% agree. It is, again, the money's not there, as you said, to compare to those other conferences, but the access to the playoff, they are in a way better situation than all those other schools. They just are. And hopefully it pans out for them. And because of who they'll play, they'll always have, a somewhat easier path to get there. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating to see what some of these other schools would do as they look at it. With the rankings are coming out later today. Where do you think Washington State is? Roughly the same?
I think they might tick up just a touch. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Whatever happens to Boise State, I think will happen to Washington State. So if Boise State jumps maybe to 10 or 11 from 12, I would expect Washington State to take a similar leap. But if the committee is really going to penalize these schools and say, they're not playing the great schedule, which I think is not the right way to judge these schools. I think you have to judge who's the better team if you're ranking them. But if you're going to really penalize these schools for the schedule that they're playing, particularly in Washington State's case, where everybody in that committee room knows they were abandoned, they had no choice. This is the schedule that was available to them. I think that you've got no shot of getting into the top 12, but I'm still going to put it, Puck, at, look at the carnage that we saw just this last week.
Sure.
I'll still put it at 10, 12% that Washington State could creep up there. And again, it's mission accomplished tonight for Jake Dickert, as this committee is going to be talking about Washington State for the second straight week. You have to keep that narrative going. That is worth its weight in gold.
We need Harlan and the Utes to knock off CU this week. We need ASU to probably finish off Kansas State, unless Kansas State's already finished off, but I guess they're kind of already finished off anyways. And then that Boise State, you got to root for Boise State, but that Boise State-San Jose State game is going to be a sneaky great game, man.
Yeah.
San Jose State's fun, and they're good.
Yeah.
That offense is legit. They can move the football.
Yeah, and I don't think that, look, I get it. Like, you look at some of the Mountain West schools and you go, okay, the Wyoming, New Mexico, San Diego State's not having a great year. But, you'd look at the top teams in that conference and you look at Boise State. Boise State went to Eugene and gave Oregon everything it could handle. Ashton Genty had 190 yards. They pushed Oregon to the final play of the game. Boise left the stadium thinking they were the better team and should have won the game. And Oregon's the number one team in America. Now, is a good loss make up for the fact that you're not playing great competition down the stretch? We will find out. But I think you cannot forget what happened at Autzen Stadium if you're the committee.
You know who could use a John Mateer, as I think about it? Especially if Genty were to stay. He's a junior, right?
Genty's not staying. Come on.
Well, let's say he did.
Okay, let's say.
Mateer at Boise.
Yeah.
Well, that quarterback's not good. That's the only thing that holds them back.
Yeah, and I
quarterback
think Boise is one of those programs that getting to the playoff is enough for them. And if they could be the 4 seed, if they somehow can leapfrog the ACC or the Big 12 and be the 4 seed, I think they can win a game.
But they're going to be a problem in this new conference, though. I mean, they just got, what was it, 2 weeks ago? They got a $25 million gift.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be a problem. Like, Oregon State and Washington State better watch out.
But look, why we're ripping Washington for not having the sponsorships and the money's not there. Like, isn't the lesson here that if you win and you can be very focused in your footprint and get your donors riled up, they will open up their wallets, and it doesn't matter. It's the same logic like that Apple TV deal for the Pac-12, that the penetration in Pullman and Corvallis and all these markets where you had rabid fans would have been fine. So are there NIL dollars there that can walk hand in hand with that? We will find out.
If you were Jed Fish, would you continue to play Will Rogers, or would you go to Damon Williams?
I'd go young. I'd move on. I didn't see it in the Apple Cup. At the Apple Cup, I was like, that's the best they got. So I don't have it. The offensive line's not good. They can't move anybody around. That's been evident in any game where they get a physical test. But this Penn State game, they were just so overmatched with line of scrimmage. Does it matter? So yeah, down the stretch here, it'll be interesting. I think they have one game that they have a real good shot in, and the other two are tougher, but they're not beating Oregon. So, here you go. If you're Washington, go get this game. And I'd go with the future right now.
Do you think NIL plays a part into it? Because they committed money to him, whatever. If you tell me a good quarterback getting $1 million, I'm going to assume Will Rogers got $1 million.
Yeah, and I do know the boosters are paying attention to this. They feel vested. They feel like, hey, I was responsible for helping bring this player to this school. Now, Oregon's different because I think you've got one guy walking around who's going, I brought them all here. But I think at some of these other places, you've got a guy sitting on the 50-yard line in row 10 or in a suite who's saying, why did I give if my guy's on the sideline? So I think absolutely it complicates the rotation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't understand the obsession of becoming bowl eligible. Sure, fine, you get more practices. What, you're going to go to the Independence Bowl? It's in Shreveport, Louisiana.
I'd rather be recruiting. I'd rather be out recruiting.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the extra practice is really warned being in Shreveport when it's like 50 degrees and you're playing somebody terrible. I'm with you. I would go with Damon Williams. Okay, I promise you, and I know I've kept you long. Just from a journalistic standpoint, okay? I'm curious about the line of questioning that Dan Lanning went through this week. There was a report. You know where I'm going with this?
Go.
There was a reporter that tried to pin him down. And listen, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm about as liberal as there is, okay? And I think a lot of people know that. I don't go into politics a lot, but I'm liberal, real liberal. For people that don't know, there was a reporter there on Monday, I would assume, that tried to get Dan Lanning to react to the election. And he wanted Dan Lanning to say, I disagree with the election. That's what the reporter was trying to get. And my question is, like, what are we doing?
I know.
Like, what are we trying to accomplish with that question?
I'm a big fan of the news conference being a news conference, but when it turns into an agenda conference or, let me take it otherwise mundane Monday. I feel like this on my own show. Like, there are sometimes you can't avoid talking about politics because it bleeds into sports in ways that never did before. But I know that people are coming to my show. They're not coming to my show to find out what I think about the election or who I voted for and where I stand on this issue or that issue. They're coming to the show to escape a little bit. And I'm not saying that I need to stick to sports because sometimes you don't stick to sports. But bringing that into the news conference, I mean, what else was in the bag? Like, I don't care what Dan Lanning's views are on healthcare and the economy and how he voted. I want to know if his kids are ready to play and why they were sluggish against Maryland. I want to know, does he have good guys on this team? I want to know can he beat Ohio State in a rematch? I want to know how he's managing the roster for the rest of the season. There's so many other things that are on my mind as they go off to Wisconsin for the first time in his career. so much more there.
Great.
You're fishing. It's too much fishing.
Yeah, and it was just the way, and I thought he handled it perfectly. I really do. I thought Lanning did a good job of just because he knew what was going on, because it was a long rambling question, and then he just answered it. I thought perfectly. Last before you leave,
and by the way, long rambling questions. Can we just get a moratorium on that? I don't care if you're a reporter. I don't care how much you know. I don't care if you know 12 formation, 13 personnel. I don't need to know that you don't need to qualify yourself as an expert in the news conference in the run up to your question. Just ask the question.
Just ask it. I'm so tired of these football reporters. You see it in the NFL too. You know, the all 22 is showing me, was that a quarter coverage there? Were you in a Tampa 2? First of all, dipstick, ask. You don't even know what it is. Stop pretending like you know what it is. Just ask, why was the pass coverage not good this week? That's it. Yeah. Just sort and simple.
Or ask the coach, help me understand this, or help readers or listeners or viewers understand.
What about the will linebacker?
You know, what you're doing here. Yeah.
Brian Wheeler passing away last week. I talked about it yesterday. I mean, it was before you and I had known each other. When did you get to Portland, by the way?
2002.
Okay, so almost. We were about a year apart. A couple years apart. And I remember getting there, working and covering the Blazers early on, and I start talking to him. He couldn't be nicer. He put his arm around me. He helped me as a young 23-year-old broadcaster. You know, he ended up taking me to Vegas to go call summer league games and would always listen to tapes, and he was just the kindest soul. I mean, he had a troubled soul too, but he was so kind, and he was such a damn good broadcaster.
Yeah.
And I just remember, I think back, and I didn't know when I moved there. I didn't know. I mean, a little bit. I didn't know the love affair of the city with Bill Schonely and the Blazers. Right. Got to know it certainly when I moved there and was working there. But it certainly had seen what it's like here in Seattle with great broadcasters that we've had. And I think back about, he walked into a situation where he replaced a legend.
Yeah.
And he became a legend himself. I mean, John, you don't ever see that. And he was, it was just sad that he passed. He was a great man.
Yeah. For Seattle people, that Bill Schonely and Brian Wheeler, there's just some crossover there in the markets, and Kevin Calabro now calling Blazer games. And, it's Portland didn't want to like Brian Wheeler. Bill Schonely got unceremoniously pushed out of the job. He was the original broadcaster. He was not done. And it would be like shoving Vin Scully to the side and bringing in a new broadcaster. It was just such a tone deaf move. And here came Brian Wheeler, who's breaking the cardinal rule in broadcasting. He's replacing the guy, and he made it his own thing. And you're right. He was kind to everybody. I talked to so many people who said he was the kindest person. He was a gentle soul. And yes, he battled weight. For people who don't know, Brian, for his entire life, he battled weight. He appeared at one point 10 or 12 years ago to have it under control. Didn't. I know in the last couple of years, he was hospitalized. I texted with him, at the beginning of the NBA season. He was hospitalized and his health was deteriorating, and it was not trending in a positive direction. And, I sat on press row in the seat that was in front of where Brian Wheeler was doing his broadcast. I got to hear him over my shoulder, not on radio, but just kind of broadcasting the game like he was whispering it in my ear. He was phenomenally talented. Probably the best radio NBA play-by-play broadcaster of that era. He was good. And he would have gone on to do, I think, some amazing things nationally had he not been held back by his health problems and his weight. But I always wondered, Puck, I would talk to other media members and say, are we going to have to do CPR? Like, is he going to have a moment? He would get really worked up during the game. And it was sad because I think everybody, even a decade ago, knew it was trending in a bad direction. And a lot of people tried to help him. And again, it's one of those cases too, where I look and I go, he's too young to go like that, and too talented and such a nice person. And I want to remember him that way. And I also want people that are battling a health issue to go, hey, you got to get on this. Like, you've got to, if you need to drop 10, drop 10. If you need to drop 20, drop 20. I know that there's often a lot more to it than just saying, go drop the weight. But, another cautionary tale and a guy gone too soon.
Yeah. Well said. And you talk about in your mailbag of this week at johncanzano.com. We do have some breaking news.
Yeah, do it.
USC has violated NCAA rules by having 8 football analysts engage in on and off the field coaching activities in 2022 and the spring of 2023. The football program has been placed on probation for 1 year, plus a $50,000 fine. Lincoln Riley also determined to have violated NCAA head coach responsibilities, but will not be suspended. Does this open up now a door for his contract where she can get out of it?
Maybe. I have to. They're a private school, right? And that's part of the problem with USC is nobody has that contract, but it might. There are some coaching contracts there where there's a standard conduct clause that says, hey, if you violate NCAA rules or you break rules, you don't follow rules, you are subject to termination. I'd like to see more of that. The first thing I heard, like when you started to talk about it, you were like 2 or 3 words into it. I went, there's her opening. Because if you're Jen Cohen, this isn't your guy. Carolyn Folt, the president at USC that helped blow up the Pac-12, is leaving. So Lincoln Riley's got to be looking around going, there's nobody here who was here when I was hired, not that many years ago, hired in that cycle just a few years ago. So, yeah, he could be in some trouble, and he may want out. Like, he's struggling to the point where, like, you're looking at the end of this season and you look at NCAA problems on top of that. He may be saying, hey, I'd be better off as the offensive coordinator in Chicago.
Yeah. Kept you too long. Thanks, John. John Canzano. You can read all of his work up at johncanzano.com. What do you got cooking up there right now you want to promote?
Well, look, I'm working on, obviously we just interviewed Rick Neuheisel. I've got something to say about that, but Monday mailbag's out. I've got some Pac-12 stuff coming probably tomorrow. I'm taking a big look at kind of what direction are they going with the media rights? Who might be the next edition? So you can find that all there. Get a free subscription or a paid subscription, whatever works for you, works for me.
Okay. And his weekly visit, John Canzano. Again, johncanzano.com, brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com for the best in local Northwest craft beers and best selection of pizzas. Follow John on Twitter, John Canzano BFT. Again, his work at johncanzano.com. And the radio show, The Bald-Faced Truth, 7:50 The Game there in Portland, Oregon. And, of course, if you just came into this late and missed it, up on YouTube, please subscribe there. Also, check it out on all the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. And, of course, one-stop shop, pucksports.com. All right, John, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.
Here he is, John Canzano. The breaking news show of record strikes again. So USC breaking news just coming down. And you know who alerted me to that? I'm going to give him full credit. It was somebody in the chat. Where are you at? Clayton. Clayton, thank you. You got to ask John about USC. Just broke. USC back on probation. Thank you, Clayton, for seeing that. I was looking at this at the stream there, at the comments, and boom, right there. Yeah, they're on probation for 1 year. Just reading on some of the information, just for having too many coaches. We'll see what this does. I mean, if there's something in the contract where Jen Cohen can get out of it, this would be her opening. Because she's not married to him. He's a child. He's not a head coach. He's not the guy you want leading your football team. She didn't hire him. The president of USC is leaving. Jen Cohen's going to bring her own coach in, whoever that coach is going to be. And not to say he's going to get the job, because I don't think he never wants to coach again, Chris Peterson. But she's going to lean on Chris Peterson. Who to hire. And, I think the last time she leaned on Chris Peterson, who they should hire, they got it right in Kalen DeBoer. Maybe they dipped their toes back in Kalen DeBoer. God, who knows? But I wonder if this does give her the opening now to remove Lincoln Riley. There we go. Breaking news with John Canzano. And again, that full episode with Canzano, along with Danny Kelly, all up on YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube page. Go check it out later in case you missed Danny Kelly. Also, go check out the episodes on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcasts, and of course, pucksports.com. One thing I want to play for you before we get to Hey, What the Puck. I guess I could use this as Hey, What the Puck, but I don't want to use it as that. We recorded yesterday a high school football preview show. State playoffs really getting underway this week. I know it was underway last week, but these are now the 16 seed of the high school football playoffs, the real meat of it, getting started this week. So yesterday, myself, Chris Egan of King 5, John Manley of the Tacoma News Tribune, and Todd Millis of ScorebookLive.wa got together and recorded about an hour preview. And we went through all the classifications, by the way. We spent more time on the 4A and 3A, but we covered 2A, we covered 1A. Todd Millis, I'm telling you, is a freaking encyclopedia. I mean, he goes in depth on the 2B and the 1B. I mean, it's remarkable. They're all great, but when we get into those lower classifications, Todd is freaking Hank Aaron. I mean, he's unbelievable. So go check it out. If you're a high school football fan, you're a parent of one of these high school kids playing, it's a real fun watch and listen. And I'll play the clip for you. We're breaking down just to who we think, because we pretty much know who's going to win in the 2A and 3A. I mean, it's 2A is really going to be Tumwaters to lose. The 1A really is Royals to lose. And then 3A, it's really Bellevue's to lose. 4A, though, is completely wide open.
And talented this year's bracket is the parity. I mean, you're looking at it. Camus, down here, Sumner, they could have had a case to be the number one. Keith Ross is one of the state's best defenses this year.
But you could just go down the list. I mean, Gonzaga Prep with that triple option, really tough to deal with. This is Chiawanna's probably his best team, Scott Bond's best team since he's taken over the last 4 or 5 years. Meade, big and physical, maybe the biggest line in the state. I mean, everybody has a reason to have some hope in this bracket.
I mean, this 4A, I think, is exciting. It's fun. And you look at these teams, and then you start looking at the coaches as well. That's why this thing is wide open. That's why this thing is so much fun, because I don't know where we're going to go. I mean, my gut thinks this could be the year finally for the Spartans to get a state championship.
So, again, go check it out. You're a high school football fan with the playoffs getting underway, the WIA playoffs. Yeah, it's going to be – I love it. This is a great time of year. We'll have more news on it. I'll be a part of the championship broadcast for the WIA. We'll have more stuff on that one as we get closer. I love it. Chris loves it. He does – has been going to a game of the week, since the beginning of September. He'll be at the Decatur game this week. And then John and Todd, I mean, are just labors of love, but they hammer it, and they do such an awesome job. John covers the South Sound better than anyone. And does a great job of all of it. And then Todd, I mean, everything from 4A all the way down to 1B. So Todd Millis, ScorebookLive.wa, and then John Manley at the TNT. And, of course, Chris Egan from King 5. All right, let's get to Hey, What the Puck. We'll wrap up because my voice is about out. Let's wrap up the daily puck drop with Hey, What the Puck. Brought to you by Restoration One of North Seattle. Your restoration company lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services. Locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when damages affect your residential or commercial property. 206-817-8917. Visit them online at restoration1.com, the North Seattle franchise. I'm going to go back to the conversation that Danny Kelly and I had from the Ringer about Caleb Williams and about selecting the right quarterback, because you're going to see a bunch of quarterbacks this year in the draft get selected, probably over-selected to where they should be. And I was making kind of the joke, if Seattle loses the next two, should they lose all the remaining games? They get up there, is one of these quarterbacks sitting there, do they take them? It is all about going to the right situation. And a lot of these quarterbacks get selected in the first round, and we call them failures. We call them first-round busts. But did they go to the right team? And you also say sometimes it's on the player too. It's not. I think of Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. A lot of that was, and I think Ryan would agree, a lot of that was on Ryan why it didn't work out. Not so much the team, but it was Ryan's fault. For Peyton, he didn't go to a great team. But Peyton Manning made it work out. But a lot of these times it does determine where you go and the fit and the coaching staff. And is it a secure coaching staff? Does it have a good offensive system? Does it have a good ownership? The second that the Bears knew they were going to get the number one pick, they should have torpedoed the entire coaching staff. All of it. They had shown nothing. They had shown nothing that they warranted having a quarterback like Caleb Williams. and then to double down by keeping him, and then going out and getting Shane Waldron. And Shane Waldron, I'm sure, is a nice guy, but anybody that saw the struggles of Shane Waldron in Seattle would know that you're going to put the future, the keys of your franchise in the hands and of a guy like Shane Waldron to hand it over to Caleb Williams. That was a mistake right off the get-go. You got Jackson Smith and Jigba, right, doing an interview in Chicago at the Super Bowl, just almost laughing at the hiring. It's always about fit. So I know there's going to be people that quickly will jump to, well, Caleb Williams is a bust. Not a bust. Not a bust. There's way too much talent with Caleb Williams. Way too much talent. Now, you can make it worse by doubling down and going out like if Lincoln Riley leaves USC and hiring Lincoln Riley. I mean, I don't know. Maybe Lincoln Riley will be a better fit in the pros. But, do you pry Cliff Kingsbury away? Does Cliff Kingsbury get another shot at being a coach? Because you got to get this one right. You got to get the head coach right, who has to have an offensive background for Caleb Williams. But that is the nature of drafting a quarterback. It's scary because if you don't get it right, it just absolutely paralyzes your organization because it takes so long to find the right one, get it right, and then develop. And then you've got to give that guy enough time to develop, especially when you draft him in the first round. Look back to where Patrick Mahomes got drafted. It's just the absolute perfect place. I mean, maybe Patrick Mahomes would have been Patrick Mahomes had he been selected number 1 and number 2 overall. The fact is that he went to that organization with that head coach who's a brilliant offensive mastermind, and then they already had the quarterback in place with Alex Smith, and that guy got to sit back and watch a good quarterback, a good veteran quarterback run an NFL system and learn from him and then take over with a great offensive mastermind. I mean, that's the recipe. But it's hard because you have to have the head coach right. The coordinator's got to be right. Ownership's got to be rock solid when you draft these guys, especially number 1 overall. There's obviously still hope, though, for Caleb Williams. All right, that's Hey What the Puck, brought to you by Restoration One in North Seattle, your restoration company that lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services. Locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when damages affect your residential or commercial property. 206-817-8917. Visit them online at restoration1.com, the North Seattle franchise. Daily Puck Drop every single day, 10 a.m. We release all of the show, the full show, and all of our guests at 1 o'clock. On all the different platforms, YouTube, please go subscribe there. Let's get that subscription number up. Also on the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, and of course up at pucksports.com. And I got some great news from Jacob, the app guy. It's the breaking news show of record. He just texted me. Great news. The app Puck Sports has been granted access to the Google Play Store. I need to add some data and some store page. Should be live this evening or tomorrow morning. So for all you Android users, I apologize it took so long, but we delivered for you. So by this evening or tomorrow, you can go to the Android store or the Google store if you have an Android phone and download a Puck Sports mobile app. For you Android users. Remember, we go live every day on that Puck Sports mobile app as well. And again, everything podcast later comes out at 1 o'clock. Also, go on that QR code on your screen if you're watching on Twitter and YouTube. Please, I encourage you to join Puck's Posse Community Membership. If you like what you've heard, what you have watched and listened to over the last 7 months, I encourage you to support Puck Sports. It'd mean the world to me. We'll keep this going into the new year. We'll have more fabulous guests, more fabulous content coming your way. And you can be like, who did we hand? Jeffrey McDowell was our first $100 winner, by the way. We gave a prize package for anyone that signs up, or we pick a random name of anyone that signs up to be a member of the Puck's Posse Community Membership. Jeffrey McDowell won it for this month. We'll hand out another one for December. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. We will talk to you tomorrow on a Wednesday show of the Daily Puck Drop, which will include a visit with Ryan Divish. We'll do our offseason cold stove look. He wrote about the Seattle Mariners' third base situation, so we'll just pick up there. We'll talk about the third base tomorrow. Also, Rob Staten of SeahawksDraftBlog.com. I'm going to go pour some more tea and honey and some bourbon and take a long nap. So until tomorrow, as always, promise to be better.
No shoes, no ties.
Would anybody like to smoke some pot?
Yeah.
I was born to love you. I was born to lick your face. I was born to rob you. But you were born to relievers.
What do you need my address for?
We'd like to send out a mailer.
Mother of mercy, I don't speak Japanese!